So, hi Jack, thank you so much for joining me for a chat. I'm really looking forward to the launch of your new book, Two Plays, which is happening this Sunday as part of the festival. I just have a couple of questions for you, so we'll get started. The first thing that I would love to know is you have written widely across many different forms. You've written short stories, novels, still books, and more recently, you've written plays as well. Does your approach to writing differ for each form?
Thank you, Joyce, for inviting me to talk with you. Yeah, it does. It changes totally from one work to another. To a great extent, it's the subject that dictates what form the piece of writing will take. So the approach is almost predetermined. The subject might suggest itself in the form of a play or a short story, and I just follow that. I never sit down to write a play or a short story as such. I sit down to write something, to communicate something urgently, something that I feel needs to be said. And this then emerges quite naturally as a story or a play or whatever else. So everything follows on. I let the material influence the style. For example, I'm very fond of irony and humor. That's when I enjoy the writing most. But the material might decide that it is not appropriate, so uh, I do what I'm told, basically.
That's really interesting. So you kind of give a little bit of control, I guess, to the subject, or you kind of see what happens as you're writing.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And is there a type of writing or a form of writing or a genre that you enjoy more than the other?
Um, I have written almost everything at some stage or another. And indeed, I started off writing poems when I was a teenager, and in my early 20s, I wrote nothing but poems. But then I fell for the short story, and I wrote nothing but short stories for quite a long time. And I found that the short story and the poem were very, very similar. It was the same satisfaction that I got because they did very similar things. So it was an easy transition and it was an enjoyable one. Later on, I had material that demanded a longer form. So I decided that I just had to knuckle down and write a novel, and I wrote a couple of novels. Later on, then, the material that was screaming inside my head to be written suggested drama, like that a play would be the most appropriate form for it. And so I moved into drama and wrote a number of plays. So when you ask me which do I prefer them all because each one is appropriate to what I was writing at the time, and that gives me satisfaction if it works out, if it's successful.
It's a really nice approach to have, I think, to writing. Fab. So my next question, I would love to know a little bit about you and the Irish Writers Centre. So you founded the Irish Writers Centre in 1991, an institution that has helped so many writers in Ireland emerging and also writers that are a little bit more established. Could you tell us a little bit about why you set that up originally?
Um, yeah, it's an interesting story. I came to Dublin in the 60s, and the writing scene, even though I had written and published poems at that stage, I found the literary scene to be very forbidding, totally inhospitable. You had established writers gathering in little pub coteries, but I found it all very stale. I must say it didn't grab me at all, and I felt that a new model was needed. So when I got the opportunity, I um, had a go at setting up the Irish Writer Centre. And to a great extent, that did um, meet the needs that I saw at the time. I was very satisfied with what it was as it emerged at the beginning. But I'm also totally satisfied with what it's doing now. I think it's doing all those things. It gives writers a home from home, a place where a new writer can come and feel welcome, and where established writers can act as almost what would you call it? Midwives, although that might be a bit a bit strong, but they can adopt a nurturing attitude to new writers, and I think that that kind of interrelationship between established writers and new writers is very important, and that happens in the Writers' Centre. At the time, I also set up the Writers' Union because there were issues about the exploitation of writers and exploitation without just reward. So the Writers' Union tackled those issues. So I think it was a fruitful enough project, worthwhile to do.
Definitely. I think you definitely achieved everything you set out to, and it's definitely a great asset to the writing community. So the final question, I want to kind of bring it back a little bit to your book that you're launching on Sunday with us. Two plays. It features two satirical comedies, both dealing with some pretty big topics. Why did you choose satire as a way of unpacking these really big ideas?
Again, what I want to communicate to a great extent dictates both the form and the style, as I mentioned before. And, I found that drama was particularly suited to satire, criticism. And if criticism is couched in humor, I think it's likely to be more successful. So I found I was kind of driven to drama by the particular materials that I wanted to write at those particular times. So the first of the plays was produced about 3 or 4 years ago. Um, it was called The Mysterious History of Things, and it looks at history and the way it's manipulated and the way people use it to control other people. So I suppose if there's a message, it should be watch out who's pulling the puppet strings. The other one then, Killing Grandad, is a satire on heroism. And to my mind, this is a concept that is overdue for a serious critique, serious overhaul, because it hasn't changed since the days of the hunter-gatherers when the guy went out with his bow and arrow. It's a ridiculous concept and totally out of sync with the times. And the problem is that it's still used to lure young people into armies. And then when they're in armies, they're sent out to bomb civilians, to drop bombs on cities. And they come home with totally traumatized. So much for heroism. So I think that needs a serious look and a serious overhaul.
Great. I think, your approach to writing really gives you so much freedom. We don't know what you could expect from you next. It could be anything. I guess if your writing calls for it, we don't know what it could be.
Well, the next thing actually is another play. It's
Okay.
it's actually going to be given a reading in the new theatre. They have a new writing week next week as well. So on Thursday night, the 10th, I think it is, on Thursday afternoon, their lunchtime presentations. A new play will be given its first airing. It's about Brendan Behan, so plenty of humour and literary references. I would hope then that would be on stage sometime next year.
Sounds fab, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Keep an eye out for that.
That's it. Well, thanks a mil, Jack, for joining me. That was really interesting. And again, I'm looking forward to the event on Sunday.
Thank you very much, Joyce.